Hey guys, Zom Fox here, and today we're going to be doing the third episode of the original USFL team's brief history. Today we're going to be doing the Michigan Panthers. The Michigan Panthers were the very first champions of the USFL, for those of you who remember. The team was owned by A. Alfred Taubman, who was one of the nation's leading real estate developers, and there was also Peter B. Spivak and Max M. Fisher, who also were part owners of the team. They named Jim Spavital the GM, and he was a general manager of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And then they hired Jim Stanley, who was a head coach for a number of colleges and coached the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the CFL. And also he was an assistant coach for a few NFL teams. Another cool thing is that they had the first ever male cheerleader at Pacific Silverdome to ever cheer for a professional football game. Speaking about first, there's one cool one I'll talk about in a second. But first, the players. The players that they got in basically the original free agency and signing were a lot of really good talent. Anthony Carter, Ken Lacey, Bobby Hebert, three of their key guys for their entire team. And then they got a bunch of former players on Super Bowl teams, Ray Pinney and Tyrone McGriff of the Steelers. They got some other pro players like John Corker. And then they got three other starters for the Browns and Cleo Miller, Oliver Davis, and another quarterback in Mark Miller, my bad. And then they got an all-pro punter, Bob Grupp, but because of injuries and not playing that well, he ended up getting cut, and they had a couple other players. It was pretty cool. But what was really cool is the fact that they played the first ever professional football game on ESPN. Professional. They played against the Birmingham Stallions at Legion Field in Birmingham, and they would go on to win by kicking the game-winning field goal. The season that year ended up being pretty good. In terms of where they finished, it shouldn't surprise you that I said they won the title. They finished with a record of 12-6, which was enough to be the division leaders thanks to having a tiebreaker on the Chicago Blitz. And it was the second best record in the entire league, only behind the Philadelphia Stars. In the playoffs, the Panthers would play the Oakland Invaders and would end up winning 37-21, and then would go on to play the Philadelphia Stars in a classic championship game where they would end up winning 24-22. Bobby Hebert, their team's starting quarterback, who also led the league in passer rating that year, would end up winning the finals MVP. And they had a lot of successful players that year. In the USFL All-League team, tackle Ray Pinney made it, guard Thom Dornbrook made it, quarterback Bobby Hebert, linebacker John Corker all made it, and then the Sporting News USFL All-Star team, Ray Pinney made it, Tyrone McGriff made it as a guard, Bobby Hebert made it again, John Corker made it again, Ray Bentley made it as a linebacker, cornerback Clarence Chapman made it, safety David Greenwood made it, and Anthony Carter made it as a punt returner as well. In fact, what makes this even better is that John Corker, the linebacker, ended up winning USFL Defensive Player of the Year, and USFL Outstanding Quarterback would go to Bobby Hebert. That's pretty nice. So that's a good first season. Fan-wise, though, they were right around middle of the pack. They were sixth in rank. They had 22,250 fans. It was below league average, but, it sucked, but that's kind of how it was. Then in 1984, there was now more teams as the league had expanded. And in that year, the team would end up doing not as good. They ended up finishing as a wild card, going 10-8. As the Houston Gamblers went 13-5, and then in the playoffs is when things happen. A lot of people don't know this, but the longest ever professional football game was the division playoff round between the Michigan Panthers and Los Angeles. The game ended up going to triple overtime, and there was only like 3 minutes left in the game, and Los Angeles would end up losing that game. Winning on the last second touchdown. Michigan lost by 6. That hurt, and that was the last game they ever played. So at least they can say they went out with a real bang. In the season, however, the team was much less on the award side. Not a single player was on the All-League team. But for the Sporting News All-Star team, center Wayne Madloff made it, and linebacker John Corker made it again. But none of their players ended up winning any awards. And then, as for the team after that, that would be their last year playing. When the league voted on the 86 season going to fall, you see, Todd Man wasn't a fan of it because he was a Lions fan. He was close to the Lions owner, and he knew that there was really no way they'd compete. And because of all the stadium deals, they would have to play most of their games, all of them, on Wednesdays and Thursdays, which just really isn't a good thing. And because of that, the team ended up doing something that kind of came out of nowhere. Despite being the first ever champion of the league, they'd end up merging with another team, but keep the other team's name. As the Oakland Invaders and Oklahoma Outlaws were supposed to merge, but ended up deal going through. Todman decided to go to Ted Taub, who was the owner of the Invaders, and decided to just merge with them. And with that, the Michigan Panthers were done, as they just kind of became the Oakland Invaders. Which, that one is pretty bad. And especially considering the fact that, for those who don't know, when the USFL sued the NFL, they technically did win because the jury did view the NFL as a monopoly, but they didn't actually award the USFL anything. And one of the reasons for that was because of how they left Detroit, which, I mean, it kind of goes against it, but yeah. The Michigan Panthers that year too, what's surprising is that their attendance actually went up significantly. They went up to 32,457, which I guess helps when you're the defending champs. But going from 6th out of 12 teams to 6 out of 18 teams, I mean, hey, that's moving up technically, I guess. And then in terms of all-time, I mean, one of their players ended up getting really high on a lot of the all-time lists. Now is Bobby Aber, their quarterback. Yeah, he only played there the first 2 years since the team left. But not only would he win the championship game MVP, but he ended up going down as arguably the best quarterback the league had overall, as he has the record for most yards thrown. But he does have the most interceptions thrown, which is why a lot of people still view Jim Kelly as the best. But the fact that the team was able to do all that is still pretty astounding, if all things considered. And then, I mean, in terms of single season leaders, they had running back Ken Lacey, who had 1,182 yards one year. Derek Holloway had 1,220 yards another year. And then Bobby Aber had 3,368 in 1 year. I mean, the team, they were good, but it's one of those things where you look back and you just say, wow, the team kind of blew it. To think that you won the championship the first year and ended up not really doing anything else after, that hurts. But hey, that's how it goes. As for the all-time leaders of the Michigan Panthers, Bobby Aber ended up having the most passing yards, unsurprisingly. He was the team's starting quarterback both years. Their all-time leading receiver ended up being Derek Holloway, which is mainly due to the fact that he had one really solid year when he had 1,220 yards and 84. And also because that year, the original receiving yard leader, Anthony Carter, ended up getting hurt, which made Holloway the all-time leader. And then Ken Lacey left the team after 83, which because of that, the all-time leading rusher ended up being John Williams, who had almost 1,000 yards in 84 and had about 683, which makes him the all-time leader. As for players, the Michigan Panthers ended up having a lot of guys who would be all-time members of the USFL team, which is pretty cool, like the all-USFL team. But some of their guys didn't really do much. Well, most of them didn't, but we'll get to the guys who did. First, we're going to talk about the guys who I'm only talking about because they're all-time leaders. Their all-time rushing yards leader, John Williams, did pretty much nothing. He played a couple years in the NFL and 1 year in the CFL. Basically didn't do anything. Just a Michigan Panthers legend. Derek Holloway, the all-time receiving yards leader of the team. Kind of the same story, except that he played in the NFL, CFL, and Arena Football League. He, too, is just a legend of the hit team. Now, these next couple guys are guys who were either an all-star team or an all-league team at least once. You have Thom Dornbrook, who was a offensive lineman. He played 2 years in the NFL before joining the league, and he didn't do anything after the USFL folded. Clarence Chapman, he ended up doing nothing but playing 1 year outside of the USFL after. But before, he ended up playing for the Saints from 76 to 80, and then 2 years of the Bengals. Decent, but not great. Wayne Radloff, however, he actually did do some things. You see, he ended up actually playing for the Falcons for like 5 years and 3 years for the 49ers. He'd end up starting 42 games as an offensive lineman, which is pretty nice. Good career. And then now we get to the legitimate players. These are the guys that are all team members, or second all team members. Starting with Tyrone McGriff, who is also in the College Football Hall of Fame, by the way. He is an all-time second team member. He ended up playing for the Showboats the last year of the USFL, which is the last year of his career after he played 3 years in the Steelers before joining the USFL. He was a college assistant coach for a while and a head coach a couple times. I mean, hey, he's a College Football Hall of Famer and he's second all-time team. Pretty good. Bobby Hebert, the all-time leader in passing yards in the USFL, all-time leader in interceptions, a championship game MVP, USFL all-time second team, a USFL champion, most outstanding quarterback winner in 83. That's pretty good. And then the NFL, he was a Pro Bowler once. He'd go on to play for the Saints from 85 to 92 and the Falcons 93 to 96. He amassed over 20,000 yards in the league and over 130 touchdowns. That's a pretty good career right there. Ray Bentley, a second-team linebacker. He ended up playing for the Bills for a few years and then the Bengals 1 year. As for those you don't know, that Bills team in like the early 90s and late 80s, a lot of those guys are from the USFL. He would be a coach of the Buffalo Destroyers for a couple of years in the Arena Football League. I mean, that's pretty cool. Yeah, second all-time team, that's pretty good. Ray Pinney, another offensive lineman that was a second all-time team. He was one of the guys that they signed before the team actually played a game. He was a champion with the Steelers twice. He had been there for like 6 years. He was solid. And then after the USL folded, he would actually go to the Steelers again to play another 3 years. That's pretty good. He started 81 career games in the NFL. That's solid. Then David Tipton, he's another second team member. He didn't really do anything. He played for the Patriots for 2 years in the mid-70s, the Hamilton Tiger Cats 1 year, the Panthers. He had a weird career. He basically played like every couple years, it seems. But, I mean, hey, second team, that's pretty good. And now we get to the big four of the players. This one is probably the best overall, but I guess we're starting because it's simple. Anthony Carter is a all-time second-team punt returner and an all-time team first-team receiver. That's pretty good that he's on the all-team twice. I mean, that's really solid. He's ended up going in the NFL. I mean, he's a College Football Hall of Famer. And then in the NFL, he played for the Vikings from 85 to 93 and then 2 years with the Lions. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler. He had over 7,700 receiving yards in the NFL and 55 touchdowns. I mean, oh my God, that's really solid. Anthony Carter, legend. John Corker, the Defensive Player of the Year 1 year. I mean, this is a pretty simple to say. Really, really, really solid. I mean, he ended up playing for the Packers 1 year, and then he played for the Detroit Drive in the Arena Football League and the Florida Bobcats. My bad. I mean, he basically played in the AFL for a few years, and on multiple different lists, you'll see him as not only one of the best USFL players of all time, but in the Arena Football League, he's in that Hall of Fame. That's pretty cool. In 2006, when they did the Arena Football League 20 Greatest Players, he made the list at 19. Then when they did the 25 Greatest Player in 2012, he made 14. That's really, really solid. Another great player the team had. Novo Bajovic. I kid you not, their kicker was first team all time. He played 1 year in the NFL, Then he played like 4 years in the AFL. Hey, first team, that's pretty good. And then the last guy is David Greenwood. Yeah, he ended up playing for the Buccaneers, Packers, and Raiders. He didn't do really anything else, but he was a safety that was an all-time guy. That's pretty solid. I mean, that's, in terms of overall, the team is just, I mean, it's hard to say. They're just really, really solid. I mean, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You had 9 different players on the all-time team, whether it be first or second. That's really incredible. That shows that the team actually had a good foundation when they made the team and that they were good at getting players, which makes sense. They won a title. It's a shame that a team that won the first ever title in the league's history ended up basically being gone. Like, yeah, they merged, but overall being gone literally less than 2 years later is astounding. The team, their success overall, it's just, I mean, Anthony Carter and Bobby Hebert were really the only guys that actually did something outside of the USFL. But hey, I mean, they won a title, and they're back. Maybe they'll win the first title this time again. This has been Zomfox. If you guys like this content and you want to see more, subscribe and hit the bell. If you have any recommendation of what team you want me to do next, just put in the comments. Have a great night.